All right, I want to begin tonight in the United States, where there's been a second attempt on the life of presidential candidate, former president, of course, Donald Trump. The suspect, identified now as 58-year-old Ryan Routh, was spotted by a Secret Service agent with an assault rifle in the bushes outside the Trump International Golf Course in Florida.
The Secret Service agent that was on the course did a fantastic job. What they do is they have an agent that jumps one hole ahead of time to where the president was at. And he was able to spot this rifle barrel sticking out of the fence and immediately engage that individual, at which time the individual took off. Now, in the bushes where this guy was is a AK-47 style rifle with a scope, two backpacks which were hung on the fence that had ceramic tile in them, and a GoPro.
Routh was later pulled over by police in another county. He remains tonight in custody, the FBI taking over the investigation. It is, as I said, the second assassination attempt in a matter of months on Donald Trump. Although in this case, the suspect didn't fire any rounds, but it doesn't make it any less serious. For more, let's bring in the host of US Report here on Sky News, National Affairs Editor, of course, at the Daily Telegraph, James Morrow, and our political reporter from Canberra, Cam Redden. Well, welcome to you both. James, you know, the first thing I thought of today, other than it being a terrible day for democracy in the States, was the chaos that would have ensued if this second attempt had been successful. What's your reflections?
Oh, Peter, I mean, of course, that's the first thing I think so many of us have thought of. You know, remember in Butler, PA, that bullet, that would-be assassin's bullet, missed him by this much simply because Donald Trump chose to turn his head at exactly the right moment. You know, that could have had a much different outcome. And then again, in Florida here at the golf course, well, again, an agent saw this guy in the bushes engaged before anything tragic happened. But I've got so many questions about this. Yes, absolutely, you're right. There would be just real, I think, civil implications, I think is the best way to put it, if one of these attempts succeeded, particularly in the case, Peter, where, you know, there are so many questions about how do these people wind up getting so close to the former president. You know, so often we had crooks in Butler, PA. We've got this guy Routh in Florida. I would have thought there would be much more security around the golf course, especially after what happened 9 weeks ago. So, you know, the authorities have it on them to not only protect the president, but be really, really public about the fact that they are doing everything they can. Because otherwise, if, God forbid, a third person tries this and really, God forbid, you know, they're more successful in their attempt, the implications, if people feel like, you know, the president was not protected, I don't want to think about.
I'll come back to you in a moment, James, and talk to you about how this might play out in the last days of the campaign, because I think that's critically important. But it's very relevant to us here in Australia, notwithstanding, obviously, it's a leader of the free world position we're talking about here, Cam. But later on this week, our PM will head to the US for the Quad Leaders Summit in Delaware. Today in the media, and this tells me where international travel and Albanese is playing out with his polling. The Prime Minister was at pains to tell journalists he was only going to be in the States for just 1 day. Now, what's on the agenda with this Quad meeting? Because it's worth noting that 2 out of the 4 people in the room at the summit, well, they are lame duck leaders, aren't they?
Yeah, 1 foot out the door. Fumio Kishida is retiring at the end of the month. Of course, Joe Biden, not the president beyond November. So you do wonder how much will come out of this, Peter. Arguably, some of the most interesting things that may or may not happen will happen on the sidelines of this meeting. A 1-day summit in Delaware, Joe Biden's backyard. He's seen this Quad Summit broadly as a bit of a legacy piece. He was part of elevating it, along with Scott Morrison and others, to a leaders' dialogue in 2021. So he sees it as a bit of a legacy piece, perhaps a chance to say a few thank yous and goodbyes to the other leaders. But on the sidelines of that, we're expecting a few more announcements to kick AUKUS a little bit further down the road. The big one to watch, though, Peter, and the Prime Minister was asked explicitly about this today, was whether there'd be any outreach at all during this trip, as quick as it is, to the Donald Trump camp. Now, the PM didn't say yes or no. He just said his itinerary hasn't been finalised. But you think there's no time like the present if that kind of outreach while the Prime Minister is in the US to take place. There might be a few hours spare if someone, maybe not the PM, maybe even interest just at diplomacy level if there was some kind of outreach and engagement there, because they need to prepare. If Donald Trump does win in November, then it would be a very different looking administration. And, even meetings like the Quad, they might continue, but would certainly look very different under a Trump presidency.